If you wanted to know the best champions to get you to your next highest rank, then you've come to the right place. Make sure that you enable all notifications so that you can keep up with the videos that we make on the channel, and make sure to like this video to let us know that you want more like it. Before we start diving into each and every champion, I just want to preface this by saying that these champions are incredibly powerful, some of them reaching 55% win rate in solo queue, which is absurd. No matter what role you play, you will most likely be fighting against these champions in your game. So make sure you catch our tips about how to play against them. We're going to start with our mid lane champions. The first one is Mordekaiser. He boasts extremely high damage, including percent health damage. He has his own shield, CC, and an ultimate that brings you to the Shadow Realm. Right now, with the changes to Conqueror, Mordekaiser is extremely strong in mid lane and even in top lane. He has the ability to heal for incredible amounts of health in long drawn-out fights, and he gets to take those long drawn-out fights thanks to his excellent shield from his W. Mordekaiser's incredible one-on-one fighting power, including his ability to force a direct 1v1, make him an incredibly good mid laner. When you play Mordekaiser, just by your R alone, you force enemies to buy items like QSS in order to free themselves from the Shadow Realm. Forcing enemies to buy QSS is incredibly powerful, as it is gold that they are not spending on other things like damage, health, armor, or magic resist. You are forcing them to buy an item specifically and only for you. If the tables are turned and you are the one fighting against the Mordekaiser, you should absolutely make the decision to get QSS as a second or third item. If you do not buy a QSS, many times Mordekaiser will seek you out, ultimate you, and you will get killed. He is incredibly powerful when he uses the ability, and you need to avoid it. If you QSS out of his ultimate, the rest of your team can assist you in killing him, and Mordekaiser cannot survive such focus fire from an entire enemy team. Before the game gets to that stage, you do not want to actively engage against Mordekaiser when he has a lot of shield built up in his resource bar. Most of the time, you just want to take short, quick trades with him in order to not allow him to use his shield to his advantage. If you can stay out of the range of his E, then he has no way to close the distance with you, and you will be safe. We have plenty of in-depth courses on a lot of the champions that we are going to be covering in this video. So make sure you go to our website, gameleap.com, down below, and check them out to learn more. Moving on from Mordekaiser, our second mid laner is Fizz. Fizz is an incredibly strong assassin, able to one-shot pretty much anybody, and he scales insanely well into the late game, to the point where sometimes he doesn't even need all of his abilities to kill somebody. As a melee champion, Fizz has a somewhat weak early game in the mid lane. He can get harassed by long-range mid laners pretty easily. However, due to his passive, his Q, and his E, he does have the ability to trade back and all-in them if they happen to overextend just a little bit too much in the lane. Fizz doesn't just shine because he does a lot of damage. He is incredibly difficult to catch and very hard to punish once he starts getting into the swing of things in the mid and late game. Think about this. You're playing a game, and all of a sudden, you see a Fizz Shark completely come up and swallow over 4/5 of your support's health bar, and they just disappear instantly. Think about what that does. Would you be scared? I think I would be. And Fizz has that impact in games where you always need to be worried about where he is because he does so much damage if you don't keep track of him. In order to deal with Fizz, you want to pressure him as much as you possibly can in the early game without overextending yourself. If you can do that, his gold intake and experience intake will suffer, and he'll take more time to get to the point where he can actually do things in the game. Proper warding also helps greatly against Fizz, so that he doesn't get to surprise on anybody on your team and one-shot them. And now that we have covered mid lane, we're going to move on to top lane, and we are going to start with Claude. Claude is a very scary champion. He does a lot of damage, and he is very hard to kill thanks to his buddy Skarl. Claude's W synergizes greatly with Press the Attack. He can have the first 3 hits go off at a higher attack speed, and then the 4th one will be empowered even more by the expose from Press the Attack. Claude has a good early game and a great mid game. He can fall off a little bit in the late game due to him being prone to being kited. If you can get even just a little bit of a lead in lane as Claude, you can blow it wide open. Not only that, but ever since they added the ability to reduce healing on Claude's Q, you will be able to counter champions that rely on their healing, such as Aatrox, Irelia, and Vladimir, to name a few. Although Claude may struggle in the early levels against them, once he gets rolling, he absolutely demolishes them. Don't be afraid to lead your team into a fight. Your ultimate as Claude is incredibly powerful, and the movement speed is underrated by many people. You can easily chase after and corral your enemies and wipe them in a team fight as you lead your team. Your ultimate can also be used as a flanking tool. Because it gives such good movement speed and travels quickly to allies, you can say, bring yourself and your allied jungler to a fight from another lane. When playing against Claude, you want to try and harass him off of Skarl as quickly as possible. Once you do so, you need to make sure to take advantage of his short stature. He will be able to remount if he CSs effectively. What you can do is wait for him to waste his W auto attacks to CS, as he can only CS with his Q or his W. If he does end up wasting his W, you can go in, because that is the main tool that provides him with courage to remount on Skarl. Our second top laner is Malphite. Yes, Malphite. He is a really simple champion, but he is incredibly effective. His ultimate is insanely powerful and can easily cause you to win a team fight just off of that alone. As a primarily tank champion, Malphite has good base damage. However, if your team lacks damage, you can also build him AP. He has pretty good ratios, and your combos could even one-shot people in the mid game before they manage to get more health and magic resist. Usually, Malphite will lane by using his Q to whittle away at his opponent's health repeatedly. Malphite does exceptionally well against physical damage champions, even more so against those who are reliant on auto-attacking. His E has a heavy attack speed slow attached to it, not to mention also having an armor ratio. However, as we mentioned earlier, Malphite's ultimate is by far the most important part of his kit. It does good damage, especially when you build him AP, and the knockup CC is almost unparalleled. It is an incredibly difficult to dodge ultimate for almost every champion in the game, and is a team fight deciding ultimate. If you see an opportunity for a 5-man ultimate that your team can capitalize on, you should absolutely take it. It will work out incredibly well for you. I can guarantee you that 90% of the time, you will win that fight 5-0. When laning against Malphite, you don't want to allow him to Q you for free over and over again, especially as the laning phase goes on. It will start to hurt more and more, especially if you don't have magic resist. Most melee champions can afford to bait Malphite to spam his Q early on and run him out of mana. When that happens, they usually try to capitalize on him no longer having the resource and could potentially get a kill. Malphite, when behind, doesn't work very well due to the enemy's damage simply outpacing his ability to tank them. And with those two out of the way, we're going to be moving on to jungle. And the first champion I'm going to recommend to you is Echo. Echo can clear the jungle very effectively, thanks to his Q and his W. His W being an AoE stun with a shield, and his Q being an AoE damage ability. Not only does Echo clear well, but his ganks are actually quite good. Thanks to the fact that he has a W stun, he can easily combo CC with laners who can set him up. Not only that, but even should his W miss, his passive after getting 3 hits on an enemy champion, giving him a large amount of movement speed, can be enough to kill some people without them even being CC'd. He can 1v1 most other junglers and is able to gank pretty much any lane. All in all, These factors make him an incredibly powerful jungler, and his win rate showcases that. When playing against Echo, you want to be able to match his pressure. Echo is reliant on all of his abilities. Without them, he only has his passive, and usually if he has to stay around to hit you 3 times to get bonus movement speed to run away, then you'll be able to kill him before he can do so. Therefore, counter ganking is one of the most effective strategies against Echo. Again, his CC is difficult to land, especially without setup. Echo is also extremely weak to CC. He relies on his ultimate and healing from Conqueror to keep him safe. So, if you can deny him the ability to ultimate by CCing him until he dies, he is an extremely ineffective champion. Moving on from Echo, we're gonna jump onto Warwick. Warwick is a strong early and mid-game jungler. He has high healing from his Q ability, leading to him having very healthy clears. As Warwick, you rely greatly on the movement speed given to you by your W. Usually, if you don't have your W off cooldown, you will only be ganking a lane if they are under the 50% health threshold to give you your W passively. Because Warwick has no mobility other than his ultimate, you have to rely on your W in order to do ganks for the most part. Thanks to Warwick's Q and R synergizing with Press the Attack and some of the changes in the early season, Warwick is quite strong right now. You want to get Tiamat as soon as possible on Warwick, as he has difficulty clearing camps like Krugs and Raptors without it. Again, he is an early and mid-game focused jungler due to his weakness of anti-healing and being kited. So, when playing against Warwick, you want to invest in items like Executioner's Calling and Morellonomicon as the game starts progressing towards the mid-game. It will heavily counter his healing part of his kit and make him much less effective. On top of this, if you can target him with slows, Warwick has a very hard time getting into a fight. His R distance scales with movement speed, and taking any damage cancels the movement speed from his W. Now, we're going to take a big step towards the bot lane, starting with AD carries. First one up on the track is Heimerdinger. Yes, Heimerdinger. Believe it or not, Heimerdinger actually has one of the highest win rates of any champion played in the AD carry position. This is due to his incredible pushing power and 3v2 potential. Heimerdinger's turrets, grenades, and rockets allow him to both CS safely from a distance and push the lane extremely hard when he wants to. Being able to control your lane as you see fit is a very powerful tool, and that is why Heimerdinger is so powerful right now. Even if you find yourself in a bad situation, if you have your turret set up, you can easily turn it around. Your turrets do incredible damage, especially when you make them shoot lasers from landing your other abilities. Because his damage is so high, and that he has CC and decent range, he can easily contest any other bot lane duo in the game. Honestly, you could probably even play Heimerdinger by himself in the bot lane and still do pretty well. Because of his insane capabilities on his own, he can combo with pretty much any support to create an incredibly oppressive and difficult lane for his opponents. One of the classic combos is Heimerdinger and Fiddlesticks, an absolute CC and damage nightmare. In order to avoid falling victim to Heimerdinger, you want to target his turrets in lane. They are one of the main reasons why he can push the lane so easily, and they are on a limited resource timer for him. He only gets another charge to place another tower every so often. This scales with level, and if you keep track of how many turrets he has out and in storage, you can effectively decide what to do in the lane. If he has completely run out of turrets, usually you want to shove him in because he has a hard time CSing under turret. However, you can also use the opportunity, if the lane is pushing towards you, to call for your jungler or other teammates to help gank him, as he doesn't have as many tools to deal with the fight. Moving on to a more traditional AD carry type of champion, we are going to look at Ashe. Right now, with many other AD carries catching nerfs, Ashe is actually quite strong. She also has many different rune possibilities to take in lane, in order to address that lane specifically. She can use Comet, Lethal Tempo, Press the Attack, or even Fleet Footwork. Combine her flexibility with the other AD carries being nerfed in some way, and boom, Ashe is one of the best AD carries right now. Ever since her slow got buffed, Ashe has been able to chase down targets with the help of the Approach Velocity rune. Enemies who engage on you better be sure that they can win the fight quickly, otherwise Ashe's slow is going to prove a huge problem as they try and retreat and perhaps engage again. You can chase down some of the most mobile champions in the game with Ashe because her slow combined with approach velocity is so potent. On top of all of this, should the enemy not have a form of hard engage, Ashe's slow makes it incredibly difficult for the enemy team to find a way onto her, and you can easily use her slows to space yourself away from enemies and keep you and your team safe. When you are playing against Ashe, you want to try and set her behind as early as possible. She doesn't have a particularly strong early game in terms of damage, so if you can punish her early on, she won't have the damage to keep up with you as the game goes on. On top of that, if your team manages to pick champions who just don't care about her slows because they have so much mobility, or their mobility will cause her to die, then she is not as much of a threat. Also, if you happen to be playing a tank or a bruiser who can build the item, Thornmail is actually incredibly effective against Ashe, even more so if she's trying to build healing to keep herself healthy and safe. Now with our AD carries out of the way, we're gonna move to support. First up, Leona. Leona recently got a buff to her W, and because of that buff, she has become very hard to kill in the early mid game, as she gets a subtractive reduction to the damage that she takes. So, if you are dealing a lot of small damage numbers rapidly to her, either because of damage over time skills, or you are a rapid firing AD carry, you are going to do very little damage to her. Not only is Leona very tanky for a support, she also got buffs to her engage and her low cooldown CC. Her Q is incredibly low cooldown, and you can repeatedly stun targets multiple times in the same fight. In the very early stages of the game, Leona also has a very powerful level 2 and level 3 engage. If you can get on your enemies as soon as you hit level 2, chances are you're going to win the fight. She has her E for CC and her Q for CC most of the time at level 2. It is not terribly hard to land and also incredibly effective. If you can leverage Leona's powerful early game all-in, her great tankiness in the early and mid game, and her low cooldown CCs, you're gonna do amazing on her. If you find yourself up against Leona, understand that when she has her W on, she is going to be incredibly difficult to kill. You want to try and wait it out, or even better, potentially ignore her for more important targets. Her job is to get in your and your team's way, so if you can find your way around her, that would be the ideal way to deal with her. Sometimes it is best to ignore the support and go straight for the damage dealers. In Leona's case, a lot of her damage comes from her allies proccing her passive, so without friends, she doesn't really do anywhere near as much as she could with them. Last, but certainly not least, is Blitzcrank. Ever since Riot decided, oh, we need to buff Blitzcrank's Q and R, he can do pretty much anything. If you land one good hook as Blitzcrank, you are almost guaranteed to kill that enemy. Because of this, Blitzcrank is incredibly scary in tower sieges and objective contests. Because his hook has so big of a range, it is hard to ward for him and avoid him all the time. That ever-present danger that gets into your enemy's minds can be incredibly effective and cause them to make more mistakes than they might make usually. In order to utilize Blitzcrank to his fullest though, you do want to try and avoid hooking tanks. Blitzcrank doesn't really get much done by hooking a tank, and honestly sometimes can even harm his team, so that is something that you absolutely want to avoid. Make sure that you utilize your wards to spot enemies out and try and go hook them and bring them to your team. You can also use minion deaths as a way of sneaking in extra hooks in lane and during tower sieges. If you see a particularly low health minion, wait for your team to go and kill it, and then launch your hook as soon as they kill it. The enemy team probably isn't going to be looking out for that, and you'll catch them by surprise, and they'll be dead before they know it. When playing against Blitzcrank, you want to make sure that you understand just how big his hook range is. You want to make sure that you know how to minimize your risk by understanding his maximum range. That way, if you need to say, go buy an item, you can recall in a safe place. On top of that, don't lose track of the Blitzcrank. If you know where he is, you can understand the angles that he can possibly hook from. So try to ward and make sure that you know where he is at all times that he could be a threat to you. Early on in the lane, respect his mana barrier passive, as it actually shields for quite a bit. If you manage to poke him and get it procced when he doesn't want it to go off, it's actually a very good strategy to then set up for an all-in afterwards. And there you have it. Those are our top 2 champions for every role in order to climb the best you possibly can. These champions are incredibly strong, and you should absolutely take advantage of them in your games, or at the very least, understand how to play against them. Make sure you go to our website, gameleap.com, down below, and check them out to learn more.